Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar for Civil 3D, attaching additional BIM information to model elements. My name is Paul. I work for a company called Micrographics in Cape Town, South Africa. We are an Autodesk partner. So welcome to everybody here or that is watching this after the fact. I've been delving into Civil 3D recently, creating some courses and teaching some classes, and also looking at how it integrates with different software within the Autodesk AEC collection. And what interests me most of all is the building information modeling aspect of software in general. And to that end, I had a look at what can be done with Civil 3D. And as usual, I had some misconceptions about what is possible based on my theoretical knowledge, and of course you never know until you test something. And while I might not have the full knowledge, I think I've got some understanding of the capabilities or the limitations that we are subjected to at the moment, and I'd like to expose that as well, and maybe also take this into the future and maybe become involved to shape through the ideas for Autodesk what it could be in the future, and if there is a need for that. So to start off with our agenda today, just by way of introduction, I'd like to introduce the issue to you. Then we'll quickly talk about standards. Standards are various different standards that you could have within the construction process. Typically, if we have 3D models, then we attach information to the 3D elements, and that could be relevant downstream for whatever reason. Then we're going to look at Civil 3D, is how we can actually add extra information to Civil 3D elements. So property sets, how we can manage property sets and apply property sets to elements. So once we've created the property set, how can we apply a property set to elements, how to transfer property sets between drawings, the behavior of information in Navisworks and IFC, and I also took it on myself to have a look at the Autodesk Construction Cloud in this case. Some limitations there, and then a conclusion which might also assist you in your decision of whether or not to follow this path at this time. So BIM models consist of 3D elements, and the properties of relevance downstream of the design for qualification, scheduling, and facilities management. Those are three of the typical example coding that you might choose over and above what you normally come into contact with. Civil 3 does not have a BIM-like app or an app like the BIM interoperability tools for Revit, and instead we can create and use extended data property sets. Alright, so now let's start at the beginning. There are many standards that can be applied within a BIM project. So in this case, you can see, for instance, that there is some purposes of why we might want to apply standards. One of them might be during the appointments of task teams and appointed bodies, common data environment for collaboration, and then in this case I said for classification, and then of course for costing, container naming, level of information need, that's quite an important one, object authoring, drawing, for asset information, for facilities management, again highlighted, health and safety, security, quality assurance, and quality control. On a large project, this is typical, and these items might or might not be applicable based on what the client asked for in the EIR. but that will be given typically to a design team at the beginning of a project in the BIM execution plan, or part of the documentation that accompanies the BIM execution plan. And so that is of relative interest. In South Africa, of course, we've got the ASAQS elemental classification. That is a classification specific to South Africa. I have investigated this within Revit in the past, so I know how to handle that in Revit, but not necessarily in the past for Civil 3D. And even so, once you see that within Navisworks, there are some questions that arise, and we'll see that later. We're going to focus on something that's called the Uniformat 2015 coding. I just want to get the file open in the background here. So the Uniformat 2015 is a coding that is used quite often in South Africa, but also globally. We normally use it with the classification of elements at the beginning. One of the reasons for that is the level of detail that we'd like to see from that classification. I'd just like to show you what that looks like. And we've got the file, we're opening that in Excel at the moment. And so you can see that it's basically a sequencing of events that informs the development of, or the construction of a building. So typically that might be how a civil engineer, a quantity surveyor, or a project engineer who sequences the operations of building the building would look at a project. And the elements that are within your model are typically mapped onto this coding. So what we're looking at is this code over here that says 810-10-100. That would reference footings and pile caps. And so these are foundations that normally is done first, then there's basement, and then all the way at the end we've got our services. There's electrical services, there's equipment, and so on and so forth. Right, so the question becomes follows. If we search for pipes, we can say control find, say water. Then within this spreadsheet, you'll then find some water elements. So there, for instance, is a cold water service or a hot water service. You could site dewatering, chilled water service, municipal water services here that I can see. Potable water distribution and storage. There we go. Okay. H747. Okay, so that's H747 under the water supply. Right, so these items over here might be of interest to us if we were doing a water supply. And then there are storm sewers and sanitary sewers. So if you look at a typical Civil 3D drawing, just something that I forgot to mention, I do apologize, is that the extended data also extends into AutoCAD and AutoCAD verticals. But these would then be the items of interest, or the coding of interest for regards to our piping within Civil 3D. So once you have a standard, in this standard that would be the Uniformat 2015, typical within software, you can then use that to attach to elements. We'll be using that shortly. All right, so there you can see an example of a Uniformat 2015 coding for our piping within Civil 3D, and that is going to be used for classification and for level of development. So just to explain that to you, that would be the detail at which the elements that we draw would be shown at a specific level of detail. So here you can see level of details 1 through to 200, 300, 400, 500. And for each one of those level of details, you might have to show different details, or how does it fit onto something else? How is it assembled? What are the installation drawings? So, or even if it's been as built, that would be 500. So after it's been built in, what is there? That's the level of detail, level of information need. And then also for facilities management. So after you've created all these things, then can you isolate them within facilities management? Usually we use Autodesk Tandem. If you haven't played with Autodesk Tandem yet, that is the latest development around digital twins for Autodesk. You can sign up for free at the moment and learn about Autodesk Tandem. It leverages, if you are running the Autodesk Construction Cloud, you have access to that, it leverages the models on the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So Autodesk Tandem is available for that. So first things first, can we define a property set? The answer is typically yes. So we're going to see how to do that. I'm using Civil 3D at the moment. So there is Civil 3D. I'm going to open one of these files that I've been working with. It's already got a bit of a pipe pressure network in the file. And I've zoomed in on an appurtenance, which you can see at the end. I think it's a fire hydrant. There's an appurtenance, or check valve rather, and there is a pipe running next to that. This is cold water supply, so it's potable water. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to apply the coding to this potable water system so that we can identify based on that coding. If you click on this element, you'll see, if you've got the properties window open on the right hand side, if you are looking for the properties window, you can either just right click on properties, maybe document on the right, or you'll also find these properties on the view tab. And you can see your properties palette over there. Now you've got the design properties, which gives you your typical information, your name, your description, your render material, style, etc. Then we've got display parameters, nothing at the moment, the object class, and extended data. And in extended data, you'll see that you can either reference other documents, notes, or hyperlinks, but there's nothing here that would help me to attach the coding for our standard that we'd like to apply. So that's an issue. The tool that we use for this in AutoCAD and AutoCAD Vertical, so this would be applicable not only for Civil 3D but for others as well, other versions or other verticals of AutoCAD and AutoCAD vanilla itself, is within the Manage tab. There's the Manage tab. On the Manage tab, under the Property Data panel, which you can see over here, there is the Define Property Sets command. You click on the Define Property Sets command, and there you can see it coming up. Just for those of you that might be wanting to ask questions, just remember that there is a lag on this broadcast, so the best is to just comment in the live chat. I am looking at the comments on the side, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them. In the meantime, don't try and ask your questions verbally, it won't come through to us. Just type into the chat if necessary. When you open this, you might be confused as to what you're seeing. You can see that we've got documentation objects, property definitions, and so forth. Now, interestingly, this is quite an involved dialogue, which I'm not overly familiar with yet. And what I have learned is just to do what I need to do with it, which is to create a standard and apply that. And so what is important for you to note is that there is a filter that is on by default for the filter style type. Okay? And if you uncheck the filter, then it exposes multi-purpose object standards that you could create. So like I said, I don't understand all of these. They've obviously been created for a reason, that's why they are there. But specifically, we would be interested in the classification definitions. And it's within the classification definitions that we can then create a new classification. And then we would have to give it a name. In our case, we're going to go with Uniformat 2015. And then we can see the name. Now, we have to, that's just in general. That's the name. What's the description? And we can say applies the Uniformat 2015 code number to elements and structured based on the Uniformat 2015 code descriptions. So you could give some other description there. Then what does it apply to? Well, the Uniformat coding is supposed to apply to everything. And so I'll just select all. So every single element will now have this property. And then we get to the classifications. And there's the Uniformat 2015 classifications. We right click on that, we can add. And so if we know what we're looking at based on the Excel spreadsheet, we're looking at G being building site work, right? So we could start over here and say, let's give it a new classification. Rename. There's the item. We would call that just G, and that would be building site work. And then under G, we go through to G30. That would be site mechanical utilities. So under that we add G30, site mechanical utilities. So thankfully you don't have to do this for every drawing. Once you've set it up once, that will be sufficient. And I've even seen that you could delve into Dynamo, I haven't done so yet, to read and write information onto the standard. So if you have an Excel spreadsheet like I have, in theory, using Dynamo, you'd be able to open the spreadsheet, read the information, and write it into the coding. Do you Glad to know that. This is very informative. Thanks a lot. You're most welcome. It's something that interests me as well. Unfortunately, when we get later in the webinar, you'll see that it does have limitations. So I'm still looking for a way in which to make this work downstream properly, especially for some things like pipes. That's specifically why I chose a pipe. So just also to show you that there are limitations. So it's informative, but I don't know if it's going to be useful. That's a question you will also have to help answer in the future. But hopefully you'll know how to make that decision going into the future. Site mechanical utilities, and then we would want to go into the water supply. So that's G3010. We're just going to do just the water supply. So we're going to add G3010. We won't be long with this. That's G3010 is the water supply. And then we can say potable water distribution and storage. Okay. So it will be G3010 100. I'm just going to copy and paste it from here. Add G3010 100, and that'll be potable water distribution and storage. Sorry about that. G3010. There you go. All right, so these are uniformat standards. Like I said, we could, in theory, read and write this into the properties using Dynamo. Click on apply. Okay. That's now created the standard. Let me just save this file. Now you'll see under the extended data set, under the extended data properties, we now have the uniformat 2015 classification that comes up. And we would like to assign the relevant coding to those elements of that type. So, and a relatively easy way to do that is you would right click and select, and select similar. There's a pertinence, there's only one of them. And we would then click on the Uniformat 2015 and apply the coding that would say it's potable water distribution and storage. And that then applies the code of G3010 100. There should be more than one pipe, so if you right click and select similar, you can see there are 14 pipes that have been selected, but again, they all fall within the same classification for potable water distribution and storage. And so with that, we've now managed to assign the classification to these elements. We did mention Dynamo. Dynamo is installed with Civil 3D these days. And Dynamo is a visual programming language, so for those of you that want to just have a pointer where to find it, you'll find it under your Manage tab, under the right hand side of the visual programming. You'll see that it exposes the nodes. If you start a new graph, we call them graphs. Then there's an AutoCAD property sets list definition. And so those would be the tools that you could use to define the Uniformat 2015 code in total. And I haven't done that yet. It's on my list of to-do items. And then we've also got the import-export nodes data. Here you can see you can import and export from Excel. Export to Intel and import CSV and import Excel as well. So if you know how to do this using file paths and so on, you can open an Excel spreadsheet, read the information from the Excel spreadsheet, and then write it into, and you can see it's an AutoCAD node, write it into AutoCAD property sets. So you should be able to run through an entire code like that. So it is limited in the sense that there's no way within the property set to identify per coding to which elements it would be applicable to. But in principle, you'd be able to just create a list of relevance to your file. So if all that you do is potable water and stormwater and drainage, then it would be easy to create a uniformat, so G30 standard, and that would then just be applied to a Civil 3D file. So you don't have thousands of entries, you just have the entries that you would need. All right, so there's that. And of course the next question would be, all right, so provided that we can create this standard or this extended data property set for the standard, can we now, if we have it in one drawing, is it everywhere? And the answer is no, it's in this drawing. So the definition is in this drawing. And the next question is, how do we get that into a different drawing? And the answer is interesting. So I read somewhere online that the SHP export utility, which is part of your Autodesk account, could possibly help you with that. I did try it out with negative result. The SHP export utility is very useful. So it is something that we often use when we write models back into GIS format after we're done with the project. And you'll find that under your extensions, there's an SHP import and export utility for Civil 3D Autodesk. You would just download and install that. And of course, if you want to do the IFC, which we'll also reference later, there's the IFC 4.3 extension for Autodesk Civil 3D 2025. That's if you want to export your file to a Civil 3 to a IFC format, Industry Foundation Class, which is a generic interoperability sort of file for BIM models. Within the Civil 3D world and within the Civils world, of course, we're more familiar with the land XML or just XML, but in this case, the IFC is the default standard for the BIM world. And if you did install the SHP import export utility, you'll see it under here, and within that you can see it's somewhere in here that there is a setting for the data. I think it's the data manager there. But like I said, I did try this with negative result. So instead, I played around a bit and I discovered something which might be useful to you as well. Is if you have a new drawing or an existing drawing, I'm just going to open a brand new blank drawing, just so it doesn't take long to open. Then within the Manage tab, under the Define Property Sets, you'll see that both drawings are exposed, both the new one and the old one. Again, by default, the filter is on, so you can switch the filter off. Under the documentation, multi-purpose objects of the existing, there's the definitions, the classifications. There's a Uniformat 2015. You can right click on this and you can copy this. And you can go into the next drawing. Under the classification definitions, you can right click and you can paste. And now that definition will also be available within the new drawing. So once you've set the standard up, it's easy to transfer it to a different drawing by using the property set dialog within Manage tabs. Apologies for the interruption. So that deals with some of the items. how to create the property set, to unfilter the styles, to define a classification definition, to apply to categories, and then to add classifications. We've seen that. Select the element, extended data property tab, add property set. If necessary, select similar items and assign classification of elements. That wasn't even necessary now, it just added automatically. You didn't need to add the. And then how to transfer property sets between drawings. Use the property set dialog to transfer standards between open drawings. You have to have the drawings open, and you can copy and paste the standards definitions between the drawings. And in my case, the SHP export utility, I tested, it did not work. So copy and paste would be my recommendation. All right, so now what's of real interest to me is we've now got this file. The file has got the elements, and the elements have coding on them. So what now? We need it in Navisworks would be first prize. So let me close drawing 1. It's empty in any case. No. Okay. Now this file is just called network B. I'm going to rename this as file save as. And let's call that webinar. Just web. Alright, so we can identify this file. I'm going to close it for good measure and fire up Navisworks. And then what we'll do, let me keep the memory of the computer small. I don't want to run a risk of having the computer crash. I'll just open and close. And then what we'll do is we'll open that Civil 3D file. Then we'll see about the Civil 3D web.dwg. That now creates a cache file based on the Civil 3D file. And so we'll have a look at that. Right, so there we can see the Civil 3D file has come through. There's no real settings on that export that you can choose. There might be some apps that you could pay for that could possibly do this. I know there are some that purport to be able to do that. So it might be necessary to purchase an app that is capable of doing this. Here's the properties. And there we can see if we drag this property window a bit wider, it lists them all next to each other, which is great. Whoops, what happened there? But in any case, it's selected the pertinence. It's got layer, source file, and everything else, but it doesn't have the Uniformat 2015. So when we run through that, we'll see that the Uniformat coding is not there. Right, so I discovered that this is in fact one of the issues, especially piping systems with Navisworks and Civil 3D. And you'll see that it doesn't have that ability. Right, so the alternative method that you can try instead is to create an IFC file, which I've done with a previous file. Just show you how to do that. The IFC exporter you can again install from your account. And you can see that you've got the IFC 4.3 extension for Autodesk Civil 3D. I'm going to fire up Civil 3D again. And then we can see we can quickly create the IFC export and see if we have more luck with that. Right, we're almost there. There's our web Civil 3D file, and we now want to export this using the normal exporter. So there you can see the IFC, it's under the add-ins. There's an export to IFC. So you can set a base point if you want. I'm just going to choose something close to the pertinence. You can import and export. There's a help. This is save config, save mapping, save property templates. Ah, it's crashed. Let's try that again. But you can see there's a lack of settings there. When you save those files, what it does is it just saves the examples onto a file that's on your hard drive that you can find. But it's not a place for you to choose the settings of what the IFC export is going to be. So I won't click on them again, otherwise it might crash again. But it's not just going to solve our projects, our problem. So let's just do the export without crashing the computer. These are add-ins. Set the IFC base point and export to IFC. We can choose where we're going to save the IFC. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to save that as a web IFC, save. It will process. You might get some errors. See, not everything can be sent through. There's the event viewer. Okay, you might have access to that file already. So there we can see the IFC file for the web file. There's an NWC, where's the IFC type? We're still waiting for it to come through. Okay. Alright, so it seems the web file has been created. Let's refresh this. There's the web.ifc. It's been created, 39 megs. It's quite large in comparison to the DWG. And then we'll go to Navisworks and see how that reads. We don't need Civil 3D at the moment anymore. So the idea with Navisworks is that that's what your project managers typically use to sequence your building elements. And so we'd obviously like for the model elements and their coding to appear within Navisworks. So here's open. Let's go with IFC. There's IFC web and open. That's busy loading. And in the meantime, while that's busy loading, we'll have a look on the Autodesk App Store. Remember, you've got an Autodesk App Store, and it'll be one of two things. It could be civil. Well, I would be specifically interested in Civil 3D because of the pipe elements being part of the object model of Civil 3D, and we would like to have IFC for Civil 3D. Let's just search IFC. So you can see you've got IFC out, exports plant components, smart tools for pipe networks, including the editing of plans. It doesn't exactly say whether or not it's got IFC or whether it's an exporter, but there is an IFC out. But it's for Plant 3D. Of course, Civil 3D is built on top of Plant 3D as well. So this might get you a success. This is one of the next things that I would do, is now to investigate this. It's a trial. You can download it, so you might have to pay for it in future, but you can download that trial, install, and try it out. I'll download that now. But you would have to go to these different apps, find something that's not native to, well, we call it native when it's part of the software itself, but in this case we would say, well, can the software do it out of the box? And the answer is no. As you'll see in a moment also within Navisworks, it's still busy processing the web file. And so that's part of the equation. While it's busy, let's also have a look at the Autodesk Construction Cloud. That is, of course, also something that is a possibility if you do have the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So I'm working here in GX. I've got a folder over here that's not name enforced, so I can just upload anything here if I want to test that. I'm just going to upload that Civil 3D file. I'm looking for the interface. There it's going. There's the DWG for the web file. I'm going to upload it as it is. I just want to see, does the cloud expose anything else within the DWG in terms of properties? Can the cloud interpret it differently before they export to IFC? And as soon as that's uploaded, we'll have a look at that. It's processing now. Our Navisworks is still busy going. We'll have a look at the pressure pipe network. There's the IFC exporter that I just downloaded off the internet. Or is it? Date modified 2025 at 206, 229. No, it's not this. Come on. Okay. Okay, that's busy downloading. That's great. The file is uploaded onto the Autodesk Construction Cloud. It's looking at Network B. It's a bit difficult to navigate these Civil 3D files just on the web like it is. You can see that in addition to the sheets, we've got our 3D view. You see the pertinence doesn't port, it doesn't understand it. And this item over there, if we show the properties, that's a final graded surface, so it doesn't exactly, there's the pipe element, it actually sees it as the line underneath the pipe, it sees that as a surface. But again, the properties do not include the classification. So there's definitely a translation problem with the Civil 3D interface and the cloud with regards to that. And then on our pressure network, there's some pipe runs over there. 4th Street. Those are just elements we're interested in the pipe runs. There's an alignment. Just go and have a look and see if we can find anything that looks like a pipe over there. Alright, so there's our 4th Street is over here somewhere, running under the ground. If we are going to find a pipe, it's going to be over here somewhere. But we can see there's nothing clear coming through over here that looks anything like a pipe. There's the appurtenance. Okay, there it is. If I select that element, have a look at its properties, there I can again see it's an appurtenance. Visualization, element, still no unit last 2015, or rather uniformat 2015 code being exposed. And so, again, it did not get that coding through. Yeah, I can't see any uniformat 2015 coding in that element, either for the pertinence or for the pipe. There's nothing there, as you can see. Okay, so the other option would be to install a third-party plugin and to see if that actually does the trick for you. And that will be my next step. But definitely out the box, Civil 3D doesn't do that job. So we'll be running a bit short on time during this webinar. That's something for the future. Maybe also if you find a better solution going into the future, just out of the box with the software, that might be useful. And I just want to quickly see, maybe we have time for Civil 3D. And so that in fact is part of the conclusion. Right? The IFC exports also have limitations. I've looked that up to say, well, it's actually known when exporting Civil 3D objects to IFC, Civil 3D objects are missing or shown incorrectly. Exporting Civil 3D objects to IFC format, the Civil 3D objects must first be converted to 3D solids. Right? So that's also sometimes an issue. And again, with the extended properties, that is also it could be an issue. You can always load this, but this would then be an alternative to okay, so it seems to be the same as IFC art. In this IFC art, then we will have some extra settings and what have you. So I think maybe going into the future, we'll do a second webinar. We're running out of time now, but I'll do a second webinar with at least a blog based on this webinar here, continuing the discussion and then seeing maybe under the settings of the output, then we can see if we can do anything with this. Just out of the box, I don't see that there's anything there. Let's have a look at the normal file, the file that we were using just now, the web file. While we've still got a few minutes, we can just see if the settings over here allow us AutoCAD, AutoCAD annotative, ACUI base, and check entity properties for export editor, cancel. Let's click on an element and then see if that makes any change on the IFC art. Settings, nothing. Yeah, so I'll definitely have to go and have a look at that, spend some time with the new app to go and see. And like you see, there's more than one app, and some of them might actually cost money. But unfortunately, out the box, it doesn't work. And so it does raise a question: how are we supposed to handle the coding of Civil 3D elements if we can't preserve the information in the IFC or the Navisworks, then, and we can't interpret the Civil 3D, then how is that supposed to happen? And yeah, to go to a third-party app to do that might not be the best solution. But if you ever wonder about how to manage a Civil 3D file so you can attach information, yes you can. Question is how to further the classification into downstream applications. Question is, of course, is it necessary in the first place? So I'm pretty sure, well, I'm under the impression from most of the people that I've come across in the industry in South Africa that it's not something that's commonly done within the Civil 3D world. It's just, it's an interest of mine because of the data application of BIM models. And so it is something that I will be spending more time on to see if I can come up with a solution to this conundrum, and hopefully do another webinar if we find a solution to that problem. With that, I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, at least find it informative. Maybe while it doesn't offer a great solution to a workflow, it does expose some of the shortcomings, and you won't have to spend time investigating that for yourself. But I'll still be looking for a solution, and like we said, provided we find a solution, do a further webinar to see how we can incorporate the methodology of maybe a third-party app or Dynamo or something. I'm not too sure how that would be done. Possibly it would even be necessary to do something through Forge, or maybe there's an integration on the Autodesk Construction Cloud. But for now, unfortunately, that's the best news I can give you. So until next time, I hope you enjoy your travels at BIM and Civil 3D, and good luck with everything that you're busy with. Until next time, goodbye.